We're here to talk about Silicon Valley real estate market geographically and then the greater Bay Area, which includes 13 counties in Northern California. This week, number 4. We'll talk about these URLs at the end of the meeting. I'm Richard Calhoun with Creekside Realty, working with buyers or sellers here in Silicon Valley with their real estate needs. Here are the slides that we're going to be going over. My data is quite a bit different. You might have seen the article about sales being way down. They said it was basically the lowest since 2008. I'm actually significantly lower than 2008. That's because I use a 5-week moving period of time versus monthly. When you look at monthly data in 2008, there was only 20 recording days. In 2023, there were 22, so 10% more days to record your transactions, which could have given you more sales. I also look at, grouping like properties together, just like within a region, each county performs different. Within a specific county, areas are completely different. For example, North Valley might be a completely different market than Saratoga, not only on price, but in overbidding, in time on the market, things of that nature. So it's important to understand it. In general, if you're a repeat visitor, you might want to skip these brief introductions and jump to the first data slide. I also look at some unusual data. I look at the sale price reduction. So this is how much the sellers are reducing their asking price in order to get the offer to come in the door. It's a very leading indicator. Instead of looking at the median or average days on the marketplace, I look at the 75th percentile of successful sellers. I look at overbidding, both the frequency and magnitude. I look at appreciation since 2015. I do estimated payments, so you can see what your monthly payments are, assuming 80% loan. I look at what the Northern Bay Area impacts are on Silicon Valley, and after diving into huge detail in Silicon Valley. Also available for questions if anybody has any. Also very receptive to changes in the presentation. What should I do differently? What metric do you want to see? What metric should I introduce next? This is our first data slide. What it's doing is it's comparing the active inventory this year, 2024, compared to the last 10 years. Red tends to favor the seller, blue tends to favor the buyer. The lack of inventory that you're seeing here, because the vast majority of the numbers are below 100%, indicates that we have less inventory than we typically do at this time of the year. Flipping over and looking at offers, we have fewer number of offers than normal, but less offers than normal favors the buyer because there's less competition. And again, most of these numbers are below 100%. You can see there is quite a bit of variation. And then the third slide that we're comparing is days of unsold inventory to this year compared to the past 10 years median. And again, these numbers now are all over the place. You can see that Alameda County is just shy of 100%. Most of San Mateo County is over 100%. And most of Santa Clara County is under 100%. What that's saying is a lower number would mean a faster marketplace because you're spending less time to sell it. But in San Mateo County, where you're above where you'd expect it to be, that means a slower marketplace because it's going to take a longer time to sell the inventory. Obviously, there's some exceptions. Over here, the affordable areas of Santa Clara County are slower than they typically are. The exact number is 32%, call it 1/3 slower than they normally are. And surprisingly, the expensive areas in Santa Clara County are 30% faster than you would normally expect. Moving on and looking at simply days of unsold inventory now. So days of unsold inventory is the supply-demand ratio. It's how quickly the existing inventory would sell at the existing rate of sales with no new listings coming on the market. So clearly a theoretical number, but it gives you an idea on the speed of the marketplace. It's an objective market benchmark. And in a free economy, the supply-demand curve determines what direction prices are going to generally go in. And you can see the more outlying areas, the areas away from the job centers, are basically redder, meaning it's a hotter marketplace favoring the seller. And that means it's moving more rapidly. Here, the slowest area are the expensive areas in San Mateo County, which are things like Atherton, Portola Valley, Woodside, and then also Oakland at 98 days. The coast had been very slow, but it had improved fairly significantly and is now at 70 days of unsold inventory. Yes, that's a balanced marketplace, but again, it's getting towards the upper range because starting at 78, the blue comes in, and you can see by looking at the bulk of the numbers, a lot of these numbers are sub 40. Now we're looking at a easier to understand number, and it's again related to the speed of the marketplace. It's just how long does the long typical seller that's successful take to sell their property? You're looking at properties that go into escrow and close. How long were they on the marketplace? And this number of days says that 25% of the sellers took longer than that, and 75% of the sellers took less than that. And I'm going to point out here Milpitas, North Valley, Blossom Valley, and Santa Teresa in 9 days. So essentially in 1 week, 75% of your sellers are selling their home that are on the market. The same for Fremont and Alameda County. The close-in outlying areas are red hot. The outlying areas are fairly hot, Livermore down here in South County and, well, not South County, but Evergreen area. South County is actually cool. Saratoga Las Gatos is really cool, but it normally is a slower marketplace. So that's the concept. Foster City, it went from, I think, cold to real hot, but it's a very small sample size. I think if I'm remembering correctly, there's 4 closings and probably a similar number of offers accepted. So very small market set. Now we're looking over at ask price adjustments. This is key because this really is an indication of the seller's expectation when they went on the market compared to what they have to do to get the offer to come in. As this number increases, that says the market generally is slowing. As this number decreases, the market is accelerating. Again, the hotter areas are sort of the outlying close-in areas, basically the east side of the Silicon Valley. The center part of Silicon Valley, where a lot of the jobs are basically more neutral. You can see the adjustments here, and they're fairly small, and some of them are in the positive directions. So this means that in East Central and South San Jose, sellers are actually raising their ask price by 0.3%. And no, sellers aren't making that kind of fine tune. What it boils down to is 5, 10%, 1% of the sellers are increasing their price significantly. And that brings it up. Fremont has the highest at 0.5%. This is basically sellers going, wow, the market went from cool last year to red hot this year with the new year, and our expectations are different. We're getting overwhelmed with people wanting appointments, so we're going to raise our price. And yes, it's a small percentage. This is the magnitude. We'll look at the frequency. If we look at East San Jose, it's 15% of the sellers are making a price reduction. Now, most of that 15% is in the downward direction, but then you just go up to Milpitas, North Valley, Blossom Valley, and Santa Teresa again, and there it's saying that 0% of the sellers are adjusting their price at all. So they're coming on the marketplace, they're staying firm, and they're getting their offer. But you go in at Saratoga Las Gatos and it's 24%, the expense varies at 26%. Oakland's down here at 27%. You can see there's a lot of variation, and that's why it's important to look at the micro markets, because when you start blending this in the whole county, which we will do later to make it easier to understand, it gives you a completely different picture. Now we're looking at the magnitude of overbidding. The drawback of this number is you need to wait for escrows to close to get the sale price. So you're looking 4 to 6 weeks in the rear view mirror on top of your sampling size, which is 5 weeks. So it's a backwards looking number. It's what happens back in 2023, because we're not even into the 31 days. We're the 27th day of the year. The escrows that have closed, for the vast majority of them, were negotiated in 2023. And this is where the market was then. And the amount of overbidding in Santa Clara County was 5% basically, or less for the most part. In San Mateo County, it was basically negative a little bit. Redwood City, -2%. That's a little bit surprising to see that being the high area. But then you go up into Foster City, +5, but I've already mentioned that's a real small market area. You go over into Alameda County, and they're 1% overbids to 7% overbids to 9% overbids. So a lot more fluctuation. But again, this now is a lagging indicator because you have to wait for that sale price to come in. This is the frequency of overbidding. How common is it overbidding? So in Santa Clara County, you're basically somewhere around 50 to 2/3 of the sellers are getting more than their asking price. Yes, in South County, it was only 25%, but you're sort of looking at it globally. Go up into San Mateo County, and it's basically 1/3 to 50%, so clearly a little slower. And then you go into Alameda County. Yes, Union City is only at 25%,
but most of the areas are between 50 and 2/3%. So you can see the ranges are there. You can see the specific micro market area. It's a little unusual to see, something like Union City, Newark coming in blue with the surrounding areas red, but that's data fluctuation too. Now we're looking at long-term appreciation. We're taking a 9-month period of time in 2015. It was the last 4 months, so April 1st, 2015 through December 31st, 2015. And we're looking at the appreciation that's occurred now. You can see that Santa Clara County is pretty high. The lowest is Cupertino Sunnyvale, which is surprising because that's been a hot marketplace and it's only been 50% appreciation. Saratoga Las Gatos, a slow marketplace that's expensive, has had 100% appreciation, so double the appreciation of its neighbor just to the north. But then also the affordable areas, 80%, 91%, 74%, so significant appreciation. Cross over and go up into San Mateo County, and you're basically at 25% to 33% appreciation, significantly lower. Maybe not bad appreciation for basically 10 years. That's 3% a year. But when you purchase a property, you typically leverage out. If you put 20% down, your 3% becomes 15% return on your money. You go over into Alameda County and, maybe it's around 50 to 2/3, sort of like Santa Clara County, not as hot though, because you don't have any of these 90% that Santa Clara County has. So that's sort of your long-term appreciation. Now we're looking at the sale price. And in addition to looking at the median sale price, which is what the vast majority of people look at, which is the middle number of each line, I also look at the 10 percentile, which is the number on the left, and the 90 percentile, which is the number on the right. So that quickly gives you a price range. So we'll look at the first line. So in South County, between 900,000 and $2.1.5 million is where 80% of the homes. 40% of that 80% is in this $400,000 range between 900,000 and 1.3 million. And then in the next 40% is between 1.3 and 2.2 million. You can see the upper range is more spread out, and that's going to be the same in all the different areas. But it gives you an idea what the prices are in the different geographical areas. Here's a summary of the slides that we just went over. You can see the micro market areas on the left-hand side of your screen. On the right-hand side is your monthly PITI payment, assuming a jumbo loan at 80% loan to value, property tax at 1.25%, and insurance, an estimate of insurance, your price range. So you can either pick your price range or the geographical area you want and look at the market conditions. The highlighted metrics are the metrics that are indicating market conditions. You can see that a lot of them are pretty consistent where they're all red, but when you get to these other metrics that do not really reflect what market conditions are, you have different colors. For example, you go from red to blue and then back to red, and you go from red to blue over here. It's the yellow that are your market indicators. This sort of tells you the indications of the marketplace. And yes, there are exceptions, like San Mateo County coast time on the marketplace is very high, slow, which is why it's dark blue. The DUI is at 70. That is a higher DUI. It's about ready to go blue, but it's definitely not red. So there is some variation between the metrics just because of the different characteristics of the marketplaces. Now we're looking at Silicon Valley, which is all three counties, Santa Clara County, San Mateo, and Alameda counties in a blender. And we're looking at our three components, which are inventory in the purple, offers in the orange, and days of unsold inventory in the gray. What happened with inventory? Inventory basically went up, sort of just going into Thanksgiving. Then it plummeted at the end of the year. Then it turned around and it started going up. And now it sort of did a little plateau. Now remember, I'm comparing this to the 10-year median. So this is the ratio between inventory this year compared to the 10-year median. And this year, the 49ers are moving on instead of dropping out of the playoffs. And that could explain why we are sort of plateauing a little bit here. But a plateau, remember, is the market behaving exactly where you expect it to be. So it's more likely this big run up, this catch up, or this dip down was greater for whatever reason. Moving on to offers accepted, you can see that the offers last week spiked and went down. That tends to suggest a calendar event. We'll discuss calendar events a little bit later in a news article on the volume of sales. But now if you look at the days of unsold inventory, because the number of offers went down, your number of days on market went soaring up. So the market appears to be slowing down based on this 1 week last data point. Now, you can't make a judgment based on 1 week. And that's one of the reasons I look at data so frequently. I'm a firm believer that it takes 3 data points to show a market trend change. So when you're coming up here and your first week down, you don't know if that's going to be a continuation down like it was, or if it's going to go up in reverse. So you need 3 points to define the shift in the marketplace. So there was definitely a shift in the marketplace here from up to down, from here, from down to level. And now here we're on the upside, but we don't know if we're going to continue up or we're going to reverse and go back down again. Here's record low volume of sales. And according to my data is different than everybody else. And we'll take a minute to try to explain that. I use a 5-week moving average. So I'm comparing last night, Friday, the 26th of January, back for 5 weeks. So 26 days in 2024 in January, plus another 9 days in December. That is my moving period of time. I'm claiming that we only sold 876 homes. Our previous record low was back here in 2008 at 1,201. That's saying that we're only 73% of the 25-year median. The 10-year median, the record low was 1,305. We're only 64% of that 10-year median. We're 67% of the record low. So 67% for the 10 years, 73% for 25 years. The reason this is worth taking a little bit of time on is there was an article, which is probably accurate, talking about how low sales haven't been this low since 2028, which to me implies that 2008 was a lower number of sales. But in fact, my data shows the reverse. Why is the discrepancy? Well, first off, the discrepancy is they're using the month of December. So you come back up here and January 3rd, back 35 days, that's closer to the month of December. And my numbers aren't so bad. They're at 85% and 67%. So doing better, but still I'm saying it's a record low. Then you have to look into why are the discrepancies. In 2028, Thanksgiving was November 27th. That was just about as late as it possibly can be. In 2023, Thanksgiving was November 23rd, which is just about as early as it can be. That impacts December closings because remember, every holiday negatively impacts real estate except for Mother's Day and Valentine's Day. With Thanksgiving being closer to December, it's going to have a bigger impact on the December closings. Those are things that even my data can't take into consideration. So when you're looking at anybody's data, consistency is more important than anything else. And my data, the reason I'm doing away with calendar months is also when you look at 2028. In 2028, there were 22 recording days. In 2023, there were only 20 recording days. So if you're comparing 2023 to 2008, there's 10% more days to record transactions. So do you look at recordings per day? Do you look at recordings per month? Or do you say that looking at recordings for an even number of weeks makes more sense? Based on sales and interest becoming more affordable, the monthly cycle has become less important, and therefore I've adopted the 5-week moving period. That's why it's important to understand who you're getting your data from and what it really means. Now we're looking at the estimated payments. We're looking at the cheapest 10%, the median home, and the most expensive. Payments on the low end are going down. And because the median's sort of flat, this would suggest low end, the 10 percentile home has dropped in price a little bit. This suggests that the 90% home, the most expensive home, has gone up more than the median. But again, it gives you an idea what your price range is. Right now, you can buy the typical home with a mortgage payment somewhere around $11,000 a month. Now we're going to look at those distributions. I call them weekly distribution, but they're a 5-week period. With this being a year ago, we're initially going to look every 4 to 5 weeks to try to estimate monthly activity. And then when we get to 3 months, we're going to shift over and look at weekly data. So we go 3 months, which is 13 weeks, to 12 weeks to 11 weeks. The other thing I want to point out is anytime you see a date like this, January 31st, 2023, that makes perfect sense, but you come down here and now you have January 31st, 2024, and you go, Richard, how do you have data, which is going to be my green line at the end, for a date that hasn't happened yet? My future dates are Friday night, last night at midnight. I want to give you the most current data that's feasible, and I don't want to have to change all my reporting because I think it's important to keep it consistent. So data on the 27th is the purple, which I consider the current week to be accurate, because now I'm comparing January 24th of every year to January 24th of every year. The 31st data is just to give you an indication of what's happened in the last couple days, but now you're not comparing apples and apples because you're comparing the 31st with the 27th. We won't have this issue very much longer because when we get to March 1st, we're going to have leap year. So we're going to take care of 2 days. So we're going to go from the 31st basically to the 29th, and that's only 2 days. And at that point, I'm just going to not predict I'm not going to look at that future week anymore. But anyway, let's go on. You can see the huge run up. So at this time of the year, you expect the market to peak, and that was about 6 months ago. And now it's coming back down, and these are weekly data. So now you're at the end of the year, and we're coming up on the purple data right about now, right there, and there's the green data. So the purple to the green has gone up dramatically, but there's only 3 extra data points between these two lines. So you have to give this one a little grain of salt, but again, that's the direction you expect it to go. So that is indicating that the market is going to go that direction. And then the great thing about looking at price reductions is you don't have to wait for escrows to close. Now we're looking at the same thing, and we're looking at overbidding. And the blue line here, this angled blue line, that's sort of the direction the lines move. As you go up towards the red line, the market's improving. As you go down towards the blue line, the market's deteriorating. Here's where we were a year ago. Remember that this is lagging data, so we're basically not quite yet at the bottom typically. So there's your improvement. So next week you expect to improve. There's your peak, sort of a plateau at the peak. And now you're going to start slowly coming down as the summer months get here. And now you're into the last couple of weeks. And there's the last week. And for whatever reason, overbidding is not as volatile as sellers' price reductions, which again is a reason why I'm looking at sellers' price reductions. It's much easier to see shifts in the marketplace. Now what we're doing is just comparing the data of the individual metrics for Silicon Valley, so it's the 3 counties, compared to where the data normally is. So the red line is a red hot marketplace, and you can see the purple line, which is the current data, is below the red line. So we actually have less inventory than you would expect even in a hot marketplace. Where you'd expect the market to be is up here on the gray line, and then in a cool marketplace with a lot of inventory, you'd expect it to be up here on the blue line. So we have less inventory than you would expect in even a hot marketplace. The next slide is going to take these curved lines, which is your yearly cycle, and stretch it out and say whether you're above or below. So whether you're going towards the red line or the blue line. This is the gray line that was curvy. I basically pull it straight and say that's the median. And here you can see that the current data is quite a bit below where you'd expect it to be. And the red line is just sort of an artificial placement, but anytime, even if you look at the data, that's a reasonable place to put it there. So it's, random, it's not scientifically or numerically placed, but it was sort of just a visual inspection. Here is basically very hot marketplace, and you can see that it deteriorated 2 weeks ago, but this last week it improved a little bit. Now you're looking at the number of offers accepted. So the same concept, but remember we have record low offers, and you're really seeing that. Look how much below the blue line this is. The number of offers we're having is significantly lower than you'd expect it to be. You'd expect to have at least 1,000 offers, and you're probably having somewhere, I think the number was 878 if I remember right. And on a hot marketplace, you'd expect to be up here at 1,450. Completely different marketplace. And again, the next slide is going to be taking this gray line and getting rid of all this fluctuation and pulling it out on a straight line, and then you fluctuate the data, and we're down here at only 70% of the offers you'd expect to have. And you can see we've been at 70% for a long period of time. You can see the impact of the slowdown in 2022 was when the market slowed down dramatically here, but frankly, it was actually slowing down in 2021. The market was on fire, but the number of offers sort of peaked here right after the release of the pandemic, where we had 140%, 150% of the offers accepted. And I guess that was actually a year after the pandemic. I guess here's the announcement of the pandemic, the slowdown in the number of offers, then the return, and then the surge wave that we had peaking early in 2021. The market cooled off. It was still 20% above where you'd expect it to be in 2021. You went into 2022, you cooled down, and you heated back up, and then the market sort of collapsed on us. And look how much that market collapsed. I mean, that's a greater and steeper fall than this fall, but here you were so hot, so you just went from a superheated market to a heated marketplace. Here you went from a heated marketplace to a nice cold marketplace, and prices and activity reflected that. Now we're looking at days of unsold inventory. So again, you have the three lines. The gray line is your typical, the purple's right here, and these lines are right close together. If you look at this, you can see that the purple line was tracing the black line, the gray line, and now it sort of did not go up as much, and then it's already coming back down. But now this is going to look like it's going to go up next week. Obviously, you don't know which direction it's going to go, but it looks like it's going to go up, and we're going to now be above the blue line. Here's your days on marketplace. Maybe we'll figure it out here. The days on market skyrocketed. Then it's going to turn around as the new inventory comes on the marketplace. But you can see that you're hot faster than your typical marketplace. This is behaving the way I'd expect it to be. When you go back here, you're turning around and you're improving, and that's the improvement you're seeing here. But you can see that you slow down, still a hot marketplace, but slow down significantly. Then you turn the corner and you're speeding up a little bit, still at 80% of the inventory you'd expect, 80% of the time in the marketplace. That means that the 75th percentile seller, the long typical seller that's successful, how long are they taking to sell, is 20% faster this year than it typically is based on the 10-year number. Here's the ask price reductions. You can see it normally is skyrocketing this time of the year, but this number, or this purple line, is going up steeper than the curves. It's catching up to the gray line. We should see that on this slide. You can see the catching up towards the gray line. Yes, you're still below the blue line, but you're moving in the direction to catch the gray line. These lines here are not set in any, they're not in relationship to the gray line because they would be moving. The concept is below the gray line is a cold marketplace, above the gray line is a hot marketplace. Now what we're doing is we're looking at the sellers taking the biggest price reductions. So going from marketing time to what are the sellers doing on their ask price reductions. You can see that we're right on top of the blue line right now. We're following it after a little bit of a hiccup. And also, one of the things to keep in mind at the end of the year, these trends, they're pretty predictable. But if we're off by 1 week, that's why you get these fluctuations. It's a pretty steep curve, and just the shifts in the market. As I pointed out, on March the 1st, we're going to be picking up 2 extra days, and we're not going to have that partial week any longer. But you can see the fairly dramatic reduction in the number of sellers taking the price reduction. And this is the seller that's taking the biggest price reduction. So we're only looking at the sellers that are taking the biggest 10%. How much is their price reduction? So they're taking basically a 14% price reduction. And that's on their asking price. Now we're looking at that on the gray line stretched out, and you can see that we're 40% above. So right now, the sellers that are taking the biggest price reduction are taking bigger price reductions than they normally do. And that's magnitude. Now we're going to look at the frequency. So the frequency is right on top of the gray line. I mean, you can't be closer on the top of that gray line, basically, since the beginning of halfway through fourth quarter, all the way through the January, you're following exactly what you're doing. So the frequency of sellers taking price reductions is exactly what you expect, but the magnitude is bigger than you expect. And here you can see it's not quite 100%. You can see that it's been catching up, and now you're a little bit above, but you're going back down. So the previous slide looked exactly, this one looks a little bit different, but should be the same data. Here's your average overbid. So now we're flipping over and looking at what the buyers do to come in to try to get the offer. You can see in the end of 2023, basically the last 2 quarters, buyers were overbidding a little bit more than they typically do, where the first 2 quarters they were overbidding less than they typically do. Right now, again, you're sort of right on top of the typical line, and that's what you're seeing, bidding less than normal for the first 2 quarters, bidding more than normal for the second 2 quarters, and now right on the normal line. Here's looking at the frequency of overbidding. Again, the frequency of overbidding, except for, a little bit of period in here where it was above, you're pretty much on. Yes, you went a little bit below now. Here you can see you were above, now you went a little bit below. It's the same data, just looking at it differently. Here's the sold price over a long period of time. So the slope blue line is sort of the average rate of appreciation. You can see the downward trend at the end of every year. I maintain that's not property values, it's the type of properties that sell. You can see right now that we're at the bottom like you'd expect. You'd expect this number to start going up. And again, this is lagging numbers because to get the sold price, you need to close of escrows. Now we're sort of gonna look at instead of Silicon Valley as a whole and comparing it to the 10-year typical, we're simply looking at the 3 counties, San Mateo County in the orange, Alameda County in the gray, and Santa Clara County in the blue, and how are they performing. You can see that, and this is active inventory. So active inventory came down for all 3 counties, and now it turned around and started to go back up. Here's the number of offers accepted. It was coming down for the end of the year. It looks like it's just started to turn and starting to go back up. Here's the days of unsold inventory. It was basically flat. It went down at the end of the year. Right now it increased, which is actually a little bit of a slowing marketplace. In another couple weeks, I expect it to turn around and reverse. You can see the peak, the apex is after the first of the year, and it varies. You can see that this gray line is pretty close. That one looks like it might be a week later. Now we're back pretty close, way later, but this is basically the pandemic. So you have to go, here's the first market shift. Here's the first market shift. So you'd expect this market shift to turn and go back. The other thing, again, I'm going to point out is starting in January 1st of 2023, my x-axis is spread out twice as much as it is for the first. This will allow you to see historical data while seeing current trend changes. So you can't take the horizontal distance from here and say, wow, it's delayed, because this horizontal distance is going to be roughly twice what it is for the years before 2023. And that's constant for all these slides. I think it's important to have the historical data, but I think it's important to be able to see current trends. And I hope people can understand the expansion of the x-axis. Now you're looking at market time. Marketing time is already dropping down radically for all 3 counties. That's the time that it takes the long typical successful seller to sell. And you don't have to wait for escrows to close. So that's going to be a leading indicator. This is the list price reductions have already started to get back closer to 100%. 100% is right up here. You're rarely above, although Alameda County is above, Santa Clara County is above. So here you are, Santa Clara County is basically what, 99 and 2/3%. So it's 1/3% price reduction. Alameda County, a 1% price reduction, and San Mateo County, something like 1 2/3% price reduction, because you take 98% off of 100% as a 2% reduction. So that would be down here. So it's less than 2%, which is why I'm saying 1 2/3. Now you're looking at the frequency of price reductions. You can see they're drastically reducing. They were up here, as high as 30%, well, 28% of the sellers taking a price reduction, cut in half, and basically across the board. Even here in Santa Clara County that was doing the best, it was about 17%. It's now down to 11, not quite in half, but it's fairly significant drop in ask price reductions. Now we're going back over to the offer prices, the overbid. So now again, you have to wait for the escrows to close. So there's a 5-week delay. in getting the data. Orange is gonna be San Mateo County. The least amount of overbidding is just barely over ask price. Santa Clara County is in second place at about 103%. And Alameda County is doing the best at about 4% over the ask price, or yeah, over the ask price, sale price over ask. Here's the frequency of overbidding. You can see that San Mateo County is about 38%. Santa Clara County and Santa Clara County and Alameda County are roughly right at 55% of the sellers getting more than their asking price. So you can see that San Mateo County is doing the worst out of the three counties that make up Silicon Valley. Here's the appreciation since 2015. You can see that Alameda County and San Mateo County are similar. It's flipped where San Mateo County just this last week has now got greater appreciation than Alameda County, which is surprising with the amount of overbidding in Alameda County. And Santa Clara County is doing the best at almost 80% appreciation. Look at the huge increase in price, in median price. You're looking at countywide data in San Mateo County, the orange. It was here and below the Santa Clara, which is basically unchanged. And now it's up, and it's up, you know, rough numbers. You went from some number around 1,675 maybe to maybe 1,825. So that's $150,000 increase in the median sale price in 1 week, a 10%, almost a 10% increase in the median sale price for an entire county. That's huge and unexpected. It's probably one of the biggest price increases we have. It's similar and maybe steeper. To me, it looks steeper than here, and they are on the same scale. Back here, your steepness would be double. So even though these look about the same steepness as this, with the horizontal scale out there, this line should be half the slope. So that's a very steep increase and probably the steepest I've seen. Here it is in numbers for on regular paper for those that prefer. The previous was on log paper. And here, because the payment went up, the estimated payments jumped. So it's not because of interest rates. You can see Santa Clara County stayed basically flat. Alameda County is on a downward trajectory. Here is the raw numbers for each one of the three counties or Silicon Valley overall. You can look at whatever's important to you. Now we're leaving Silicon Valley and we're looking at the influence of the Greater Bay Area on Silicon Valley. Starting out with the numbers, you can see that San Mateo County now is by far the most expensive county. Santa Clara County is the second most expensive. Marin is the third. San Francisco is the fourth. Then you get into Alameda being the fifth, and then they come in pretty close together after that. Here is the inventory for the Bay Area. You can see inventory is rolling over with Silicon Valley having the biggest increase in inventory. Here's the number of offers accepted. They're basically all sort of plateauing. They went up and they dipped back down a little bit last week. I believe having the 49ers in the playoff and at home, there's more social activities associated with that, and those social activities decrease the amount of real estate activity. Days of unsold inventory is still increasing in all the areas. If you look here, the gray line, which is the North Bay, looks like it might have gone down. It went up this last week, but it's in a downward trajectory from the week before, where everybody else is clearly in an up. So, you know, there's a lot of movement this particular year.
Here's the marketing time for the 75th percentile seller that's successful. You can see that Silicon Valley is the fastest at just under 40 days, followed by the Central Valley at just under 50 days. Then you have North Bay at around 58 days, Central Coast at probably around 64 days, and finally the San Francisco Marin, the city's area, at around 86 days. So clearly quite a different range, with Silicon Valley being the fastest. Here is the seller's ask price reductions on average. So this is where you put all the sellers in a blender and look at everybody overall. And remember, the vast majority of the sellers take no price reduction at all. Silicon Valley doing the best with less than 1% price reduction. Then you have the Central Valley and the North Bay real close together, maybe at about 1.4% price reductions. And also grouped down here is the Central Coast and the cities just shy of 3%. So again, the San Francisco Marin is doing the worst out of them. This is the frequency of the sellers taking price reductions. You can see all the sellers are doing less price reductions since the first of the year, and that's because now larger percentage of the market is just coming onto the marketplace and they haven't had time to reduce their price. Again, Silicon Valley is doing the best with just over, call it about 11-12% of the sellers doing price reductions. The other four areas are pretty grouped together, closely grouped together, from about 28% to about 32% of the sellers taking a price reduction. So overall, less than a third of the area taking price reductions. Here is the magnitude of overbidding. So now we're looking at what the buyers are doing in order to get the house. And you also introduce that 5-week lag time for escrows to close. Here you have the least amount of overbidding by the Central Coast. And again, they're actually going in under asking price. And so is the Central Valley, although not much, and just a hair under 100%, like maybe less than a 10th% potentially. Actually, it's probably is a 10th%, is the North Bay area. And then you have the cities coming in at just about 1% overbids. And then Silicon Valley is 3% above the asking price. And remember, within each region, your individual counties will be different. Like within Silicon Valley, I think it was Alameda County was doing the best, followed by Santa Clara, and San Mateo County was doing the least well. This is the frequency of overbidding, same basic order. You got the Central Coast being the least common with just about 26.7% of the sellers getting more than their asking price. Then you have three areas grouped together pretty closely from about 34% to 41%. And then the most overbidding is happening in Silicon Valley at about 51%. So just over half the sellers are getting more than their asking price. And again, within Silicon Valley, that's going to vary dramatically depending on which of the three counties you're looking at. Here's your estimated payments. You got Silicon Valley, it went up because there was a huge run up in price in San Mateo County that pulls up the overall at median price. You can see that San Francisco and Marin is more expensive than Silicon Valley. That's despite both San Mateo and Santa Clara being higher than both San Francisco and Marin. And that's because Silicon Valley is pulled down by the lower median price in Alameda County. Central Coast is third, followed by North Bay, and Central Valley is being the most affordable with just about a $4,000 a month payment. Here's the total appreciation since the last 9 months of 2015. You can see the cities is doing the worst. Central Valley is doing the best. And you can see that's come down a little bit in the last quarter and a half, 2 quarters. Then you have Silicon Valley, North Bay, and Central Coast. Here's the median sold price. So the cities has the most highest median sold price, followed by Silicon Valley, followed by the Central Coast, followed by North Bay, and Central Valley is the most affordable area, the lowest priced areas. With that, we come to my root URLs. That's the green. You can type in the blue, the YouTube link to get to the channel, or you can use what I call the green root URL for a shortcut for less typing. If you use the root URL, you add in the year 2024 to get to the live presentation Saturday morning at 9 a.m. You add in the letter H for handout, the year 2024, the month 01, and the day 27 to get the handout. I got that up early today, about 8:15. And then any specific episode, if you didn't want to go to the YouTube channel, you can just type in the root URL and the year, month, date code of that episode. I'm Richard Calhoun with Creekside Realty. My contact number on each slide. Happy to work with buyers or sellers. Let me see if I have any questions. Not seeing any unmuted mics. Everyone have a great week. See you next week. Thanks for attending. Bye now.